taboo for you, but what happens if we start to build a networking system for Black teachers to effectively learn how to not only navigate the system of education, but also thrive in that system? We also would be remiss if we didn't point out that a lot of Black teachers become Black teachers in spite of having a less than stellar experience in school themselves. So they're bringing this extra baggage, if you will, with them when they come through that school door. And, for every encounter or misencounter that they have with another teacher or an administrator, or even sometimes students, it can sometimes remind them this is not a place that I belong. And what we need to create in that support system, we need to create a system, a series of systems where we build a pipeline for support for Black male teachers and for Black teachers in general. I've thought about this quite a bit because, we now know that differentiation is what we should be doing with students in our K-12 environments. I've pointed out that very few teacher preparation programs do any differentiation within their programs. So how do we kind of affect that change that we need to see if we're preparing all teachers the same? So are we preparing teachers for the general educational system? Are we preparing them for the environments that they wish to teach in? So we know from studies that male teachers in particular have a tendency to want to teach in the same areas in which they went to school. If we're not teaching them to be successful there, then we're not teaching them to be successful. If that makes any sense for you.
Yeah.
But we have had some exceptions to that rule. So you may be familiar with the program Call Me Mister, which takes Black males in South Carolina and works them all the way through the pipeline from undergraduate to teaching. And they really focus on how that Black male teacher can be successful with those students. It acts very much like a residency, which we also know is very effective for teachers and new teachers, to be more specific. And that's a really a good bright spot. I know they've tried it out in other areas, but anytime we're talking about support, what does that mean? Does it just mean a networking? Does it mean, is it financial? Is it supportive in other ways? Does it talk through how to develop as an educator? What we do know from recent studies is that very often people who are not male teachers coming into this field will say, well, they don't really like the pay. We're all aware of what the pay is when we get involved in the situation. So that's not usually the issue. The issue is that of other support that educators are needing. There's a really great program right now out of California State University, Northridge, in conjunction with Compton Unified, which focuses on developing Black male teachers as well. But what we have right now is a unique opportunity. So either the racial pandemic or civil unrest or whatever it is they call it in your household has given the world the opportunity to see what our lives were like all along, what we've been telling you all along, what we've been showing you all along. So we have this unique opportunity to actually kind of delve in to say, this is what we've been facing, this is what we've been dealing with, and this is an opportunity to effectively fix that pipeline and create opportunities, not for just Black teachers, but also Black students.
Dr. Francois, Dr. Magdaleno, do you have a short addition to what Dr. Black just said?
Well, I just would like to echo the last point that she made. I agreed with all of them, by the way, but that in this current pandemic environment, it has presented us with a lot of challenges in educator preparation, development, and support. But it's also opened up opportunities for us to think differently about that, think differently about the kind of differentiation that Dr. Black is talking about, think differently about who we are recruiting into the profession and what kinds of systems of support we can put in place, not just at the beginning of teaching, not at the beginning of leadership, but throughout the trajectory of an educator, a Black educator's career, from aspiring to accomplish through retirement. And then how do you bring in what I call the community elders of education back into interacting with young people or even career changers so that they might be inspired by the journeys of these elders? I think one of the things that we don't do a very good job of is that we don't center Black voices in the conversation of what it means to prepare, recruit, and retain high quality teachers for particularly our most challenging schools, because that's where we end up working anyway. But then also um, the professional development and the networking that I think Dr. Black is speaking of needs to come from, who needs to participate in those networks needs to come from across sectors, across levels, and across years of experience. Oftentimes we put young people in these groups by themselves without the experience of more accomplished, more seasoned teachers. I think we need to bring them um, into relationship and into networking so that they can increase their sense of community and belonging and kinship and see themselves as part of a vibrant community of Black educators, right? The same kind of vibrant community of educators that we saw in the that we haven't seen since the 70s and 80s.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Magdaleno, you know, you're kind of very well known for having that elder approach to supporting leaders of color. What would you add to this around the pipeline for Black teachers and leaders?
Well, yeah, I mean, sure, if I'm on here, yeah. What I what I really would like to add was, and thank you for calling me an elder. I appreciate that. Now that actually is a term of respect,
Yeah.
and so I appreciate that very much. It's better than some of the other things I am called, you know. Having had the opportunity to serve from elementary school all the way to doctoral programs, I think was really an enlightening opportunity for me. I think that there are so many variables to bringing young people of color, African American, Latino, Asian, into the system and providing them not only with the training when they get to teacher education or administrator education, but rather to develop a foundation of wanting to serve in education from the very beginning. You know, so many of our kids come into the system very excited to learn. Really, that's what they're all about. They want to learn. They're like sponges. My favorite grade was kindergarten, and I used to love to go down to kindergarten and see the look on students' faces and the excitement as they learn things. but it was also very eye-opening in that there was a great deal of inequity, starting even with pre-kindergarten, is that our kids are coming into a system that has not provided the equity that is needed in order to develop that equal starting line. So although our kids come in wanting to learn and they just, they're like, as I indicated, they're like sponges, they're already behind. And so when you're behind in a system that is really, in many cases, is about how fast can you get through something? How fast can you develop this learning? The inequity is such that our kids begin to fall behind fairly soon. As an elementary school principal, it was so obvious to me that our kids were not being served in a racially or culturally or ethnically just manner. The language that is used by people who go through our teacher education programs or administrator programs, the deficit thinking model that takes place. Our kids, if we are to develop the pipeline for educators of color, for Black males, females, Latinos, Asians to become educators, that pipeline needs to begin at the very beginning. And what we see is that instead of developing educators, we are losing our kids. And I can say this even as strong as I did when I was a part of the system, is that we don't do a good job of helping our kids all learn, of helping our kids all believe in themselves. And I think that there's much to be said about teaching and helping the whole child grow. And so I know that I have a question. So I'm a retired professor, man. I can go up for 3 hours on one question.
Thank you, Dr. Magdaleno.
Let me stop there. I don't get to teach anymore,
It's such an honor to hear you share as what I respect very much as a esteemed elder in the community, and many people do respect you as an elder in our community, and we appreciate you and always appreciate hearing about your experiences and what you've learned in your career. This next question is for Dr. Francois, and really looking at what do you see coming down the pike in our state around how this pipeline for Black teachers and leaders might be addressed, and what do you suggest statewide organizations do to kind of shore that up? And I know you can both speak at the statewide level, but also in the work that you do at CenterX.
Thank you so much for that. And thanks for inviting me to be here. I know we're in the middle of the conversation, but my mama taught me right. You better live in gratitude, even if you have to interrupt the conversation to do so. Before I jump into what the state is doing, Alicia, I think that I want to take advantage of what Dr. Black brought up about this being an opportunity. And I think that the opportunity for us in terms of the statewide system of licensure, because that's what we're really talking about here, you got to change the system before you can change the system for particular people, yep. Right? So, or provide better access for it within the system for particular people. And you've got to keep in mind what the needs are in order to change the system in a way that is really going to move the needle. So when I think about licensure in California. You know, California has a long-standing two-tier system of licensure. I do think in some ways that separation between preparation, induction, and support do present barriers to the kind of revolutionary reimagining that needs to happen if we're going to be able to strengthen the pipeline for Black educators. So what the Commission on Teacher Credentialing has tasked us to do, educator preparation programs and leader preparation programs, is to really think about, rather than preparation, induction, and support, but really think about the ecology of professional learning for all of its teachers across, as I mentioned earlier, the trajectory of their careers. And that we do this in collaboration, as you brought up, Dr. Montgomery, that we do this in collaboration with, among educator preparation programs, local education agencies, community-based organizations and nonprofits, professional organizations, and state agencies. And that we design and sustain collaborations that nurture teachers through both professional learning, coaching, and longstanding mentoring, and thereby creating what I think Dr. Black was mentioned is this kind of intentional, coordinated, cohesive system of support that's responsive to the needs of K-12 students. Because let's remember why we're in this business. We're in this business for K-12 students, and also tends to the unique needs of educators, and Black educators in particular, in the pipeline. So if you can reimagine preparation in that way, we might find some of the solutions to the pervasive challenge that we're discussing today, which is expanding the pipeline. I also want to say, yes, we have been marginally successful at bringing Black young people into educator preparation program. And yes, we've been marginally successful in bringing Black teachers and teacher leaders into administrative preparation program. It's insufficient to bring them in. What happens inside of those preparation programs needs to be responsive to the unique needs of the young people that are in them. And in this racial pandemic, what we are learning is that, and again, it's nothing new. We've known this all along, right? When I was in teacher preparation years ago, I experienced the same thing that so many of our young people experience today. And that should be shocking to people. That should create the kind of shock that moves us into progressive action. And yet it hasn't. And so it kind of makes you think about who the system was structured for and for what purpose. That's fodder for another lunchtime conversation.
Right.
So, but when I think about Black educators or prospective Black educators in particular, and the role of state agencies, I think to myself, you got to find a way to incentivize Black educators into the profession. Because remember, this is the same profession that has not served Black young people well. And they have not served the parents of Black young people well. It has not served the grandparents of Black young people well. So why would I want to go into a profession that has not served my community? The answer to that is that Black folks who want to get into this work want to change conditions so that legacy, that what some of our elders call generational curses, and I know you don't like that term, Dr. Alicia, stop it, that we stop it here. And in this moment of activism and progressivism and wanting to give back to really live what democracy is supposed to be, you see Black folks and brown folks out in the streets protesting for basic human rights and educational rights. So they're ripe for coming into the field of teaching. We get more interest from Black and brown folks now than we have ever before. And it's this moment, I think, that's really speaking to them. It's a moment of service, as Dr. Ken mentioned. But once they get in, we need to make sure that they can stay in. And we can talk about the quality of the curriculum and the field experiences that they have. But even before that, we got to think about basic needs of folks. The financial burden that is placed on young people to go into this profession and placed on even school leaders who make salaries by this point is in some ways astronomical when you compare it to their salaries, the salaries that they garner for that work. So you think about the assessments that teachers have to take to get into the profession, right? The California Basic Educational Skills Assessment, the California Subject Matter Assessment. Then there are assessments to get out of the program. You can't get out of the program and start teaching until you pass the reading instruction competency exam and the education teacher performance assessment for California teachers. Each one of those assessments comes at a cost. I take it every single time, you know, for every hoop, it costs me a certain amount of dollars to do that. And then when you think about clinical hours and the number of hours young people have to spend in practice during their preparation, which is really important. You want well-qualified teachers, right? It prevents them from being able to earn a living while they're in preparation. So that's an additional financial burden. So when candidates leave teacher preparation in particular, they carry a financial debt that does not, that their salary does not match up to. And so we have to do something about that. And, you know, as Dr. Black mentioned earlier, I think the CTC sponsored teacher residencies program is a really excellent example of how you address that. So you give living stipends to very committed young people who want to go into the profession so that they can engage in deeper learning for a year before they assume their first teaching gig, so to speak. So that's really important financial support to get people in and get them through. And again, I'm not talking about the experience that they have in preparation. I am mindful of the fact that this is a lunch hour, not a lunch 3 hours. So I'm going to stay away from the thing that I could talk most about, and that is the curriculum part. So the other thing that I want to say about the statewide efforts is that there's really been this push not to just focus on the standards and frameworks that guide our profession in terms of kind of a one-size-fits-all way of doing educator preparation and development and support, but really to use those frameworks to design programs that meet local needs, as well as meet the shortages and diversify the teaching force. So if I could just talk about UCLA for a second, many programs are responding in this moment. And I can say anecdotally, because we've been doing this work for equity in urban schools for almost 30 years now, that there are 4 strategies that we use, and we will say in this moment, we have reinvested in, because I think that it's easy to have aspirations and goals, and sometimes you get so close to the work that you got to lift your head up and say, you know what, I need to recommit to this. And I think this whole notion of enhancing a pipeline of Black educators was one of those things where we are committed to it, but we need to lift our heads up again and re-engage. So for the things that I think educator preparation programs need to do is, first and foremost, you must increase Black presence in educator preparation. And so what do I mean by Black presence? We increase our scholarship funding specific to our Black students. We center the work of Black practitioners, research, and scholars in our curriculum. And we unapologetically are increasing the number of Black students in our program. What that means for recruitment, just last week, our bus bench recruitment strategies in South LA and Central LA and East LA went up, because we are advertising our program and what we stand for in the communities that we want to recruit from, in the Black churches that we want to recruit from, in the Black fraternities and sororities that we want to recruit from. So we really want, if you want to increase Black student entry, you got to go where they are. You got to go where their families are. And we know where the centers of Black life are in LA. We know where they are. We know where they are across the country. So why aren't we connecting up with those community organizations, those spots of cultural life to get folks interested and energized about coming into education, and then support, and then collaborating with those same organizations to keep them in program and to create networks beyond program. In the programs, we are called to create opportunities for students and alumni to come together in affinity groups. So we have a Black teacher, new teacher affinity group. And it's in those places that they're able to tackle some of the challenges that they face in teacher preparation, because there's so few of us in teacher preparation, and also kind of create this well of support and strength for what's going to be oftentimes a very hostile work environment once they leave. Ongoing professional mentoring and networking post licensure. So connecting up our new Black teachers with more seasoned and veteran Black teachers who have been there and done that, trying to place them in schools, finding them assignments in schools that really nurture and appreciate their existence at those schools. And then finally, I think, bringing accomplished Black educators into teacher preparation, not to leave their jobs, right? I don't, to be honest with you, I don't want Black principals leaving their school sites that they're doing really good work in to come work at UCLA to be a full-time teacher educator. What I do want, and what does happen, is I want principals to come in and help us figure out, how could you engage with these young people in meaningful ways? Hire you maybe part-time to teach a course or two, co-instruct with some of the faculty. We have principals in our Principal Leadership Institute who are practicing principals that come in with leader education scholars on a regular basis to do exactly that kind of work. And I know that I've spoken a lot, so I'm gonna stop here, but I do want to say one last thing. And this echoes what was said earlier, but it's worth repeating over and over again. I want people to ask themselves, why do we want to recruit Black teachers into the profession? We do know that research says that having a Black teacher not only shows positive outcomes for Black students, but students in general. Unfortunately, I think that there are some folks who want to bring Black teachers into the profession because now that's what they're expected to do. They want to diversify. And I'm sorry, back when I was growing up, there was a word for that, and I'm going to not use it on this. Diversity is insufficient for the challenges that face us. We need to we need to understand why we want Black voices at the table. We want them there because they come with a lived and cultural experience that is and they have navigated a hostile educational system very similar to that of our K-12 students. We need to listen to them. We need to learn from their experiences, and we need to design schoolings with those voices in mind, those teachers and leaders who are on the front line of creating just and equitable conditions for our K-12 school. I believe that by centering those voices and really listening to them and acting on them and having them be agents of whatever action we take, that we work alongside them and with them, that that space holds solutions to the problems that we have not been able to solve. And this moment allows us the opportunity to do that. Can't hear you.
I just want to say amen and snap my fingers to everything that you just said. You guys are all just adding so much to this conversation. Dr. Black, Dr. Magdaleno, did you have anything to add around statewide efforts or what state agencies can and should be doing to fortify the pipeline for Black teachers specifically?
Well, we know that there's things that the state can and should do. we know that the barriers that exist to getting teachers of color in the classroom, specifically Black teachers in the classroom, they exist for a reason. Those barriers also exist for the SAT or the whatever your standardized test score, the tests that you're taking, however they exist. So those barriers exist. We have to remove ourselves from saying, well, this is the standard, this is how it's supposed to be, because those were created for someone who may not look like the people we're trying to recruit now, that may not have that may not have had the biggest impact in their own trajectory as a student and now as a professional. I do want to add that my colleagues, first of all, are just amazing. So I want to comment on some of the things they've said. When we have a lack of racially, culturally, and a just manner for students, that also transitions into a lack of racially, culturally, and just manner for Black teachers. So the same thing, I very often say when we talk about Black male teachers in particular, the same thing that young Black boy is experiencing in the classroom, that Black male teacher is experiencing at that school. So it becomes rather difficult to be successful when even your colleagues think of you in a deficit type of role. So that plays itself out when we talk about strategies for increasing the numbers of Black teachers, when we haven't changed any of our policies to increase that number. So right now we're just saying we want more, but we've never come up with a strategic plan on how to do so. So when we finally do get Black voices at the table, how often do we listen to that Black voice? Or do we just have the Black face there that we choose not to listen to? And teacher preparation programs, educator preparation programs, we all recognize that we are not going to magically increase the numbers of Black teachers tomorrow. We know we have to continue to work with the teacher candidates and the administrator candidates that are brought to us. But what we do have an opportunity right now to do is really engage them in this work of equity. Really kind of drill down to this work of equity and what that means, not just for Black students in our schools and in our state, but for all students in our state.
I really appreciate, I know you asked the Dr. Ken, I'm just going to say 2 words. I really appreciated the reminder that in some ways, our Black teachers and leaders, their experiences in the system mirror the experiences, the historical experiences of our K-12 students in the system. And that it has been our observation that when there are so few Black teachers coming into the profession, schools that end up having them, particularly Black male teachers, their expectations of them are different. They are expected to be the disciplinarian. They are expected to be able to solve all of the challenges that the Black children at this school face. They're expected to have all of the answers. They become the mentor for all of the Black children and it includes some of the brown children that are having difficulties. That all rests on the shoulders of Black teachers. If I go through some of our schools in South LA where there are, larger numbers of Black students, it is the Black teachers or the Black principals that are after school meeting with their Black students in affinity groups to help them figure out how they navigate the system, to help them to develop the sense of belonging in this school. And so I think that we really need to rethink the expectations that we hold for Black teachers, particularly Black male teachers. And I will say, as a Black woman, I will go to the wall for young people, particularly young people that look like me. But I need help. You can't just put me in that position and leave me there floundering by myself. And so when we talk about these networks of support, I'm talking about that kind of support where I can continue to do the work, where young Black teachers can continue to do the difficult work that unfortunately they're asked to do far too often before they are sufficiently ready to handle the emotional and mental labor that comes along with it.
So let me ask a question. Is that we know that the system doesn't work for our kids. It doesn't. The system has never really worked for our kids. I'm saying kids of color, Black kids. It doesn't work. If it was going to work, we would hold as much power as people of color as others do, the dominant group does. We don't hear about, I mean, ethnic studies, for instance. My nonprofit is a supporter of ethnic studies. It was vetoed. The governor is not supporting it. Okay. You talk about mentoring. I think I have to take some credit. I'm considered somewhat of a mentoring guru. Most things that you're saying, both Dr. Black and Dr. Francois, were part of my research at UCLA 20 years ago. It was about power or the lack thereof. It was about addressing racial and ethnic issues 20 years ago. It was about changing the system, not changing our kids, changing the system. The system is the same. Our kids are still failing at rates much higher than they should. I have probably begun, well, anywhere from 5 to 10 mentoring programs from CALSA. I was the originator of the CALSA program. I developed my own nonprofit CLEAR program. I developed 2 mentoring programs at Cal State Fresno. Almost every one of them, in some attempt, whether it was in P-12 or higher education, to keep people of color on staff. At the higher education part, we started a journal in order to give my young assistant professors a place to publish. Because if they published about race or ethnicity, too often the deans or the people in the tenure committee didn't have an idea of what they were talking about. And so I think that the system needs, this is a great opportunity. You've said it yourselves. This is a great opportunity not to go back to the way things were. We cannot do that. If we do, then you know what? We're as guilty as anyone else. We cannot go back to the same old things because the same old things are not working. I've been part of teacher prep. People teach in teacher prep that have no idea about racial and ethnic issues. I was a director of a doctoral program. 80% of my students had never addressed the issue of race before. We support our teachers of color, our administrators of color, but we have to include race and culture and ethnicity as part of that discussion. It doesn't matter if other people want to be involved in it or not. I started the Latino mentoring program because we needed our own network. We needed our own power folks. And that really worked out because our young people then began to see, oh, we do have people in power. We can go to those people. But one of you mentioned, I think it was you, Anna Marie, is that sometimes when we get to those positions, we are our own worst enemies because we forget where we came from. We got ours, you get yours. And that's not what mentoring's all about. That is not what developing and caring for each other is all about. Because if we're not going to support each other, who is? Who is? And that is a critical factor. The CALSA mentoring program is now in its 17th cohort. My CLEAR nonprofit that I started after I left CALSA is now in its 9th cohort, and it is inclusive. It's a social justice leadership program, inclusive of all races. But it's actually, we use the art of war in order to learn how to be strategic in being leaders.
Dr.
Because
Magdaleno,
yes,
I'm really glad you brought up your programs, and particularly the mentoring program and the work you did in the doctoral program at Fresno State. And I'm wondering, have you and your team thought specifically about the pipeline for Black teachers and leaders, given what's occurring in our country today, and what specific things you might be doing to recruit Black teachers and leaders into your mentoring programs and into the CLEAR program as well?
well, yeah, I'm going to tell you, what happened is a few years ago, I offered to help African-American communities develop, African-American organizations develop a mentoring program. And basically, my offer was not taken. It was not taken. In CLEAR, we have African American, we have Asians, we have a strong, very large Hmong community here in the Central Valley. We have Latinos. In fact, I have some folks down in Southern California now that are part of our mentoring program. And here's why. It's inclusive, and that is because we have to know what leadership is about. If we are, we can mentor on how to keep your job, but if you don't know leadership and if you don't know social justice leadership, then it doesn't matter. If it's a program strictly for African Americans, you're absolutely going to be able to address the issues of race and such that address that group, but it's still, you need to know leadership and you need to know social justice leadership. So I don't think, and as I indicated, I started the mentoring program for CALSA, and it was strictly for Latinos. Well, that lasted 2 years because we ran out of mentors very quickly. The numbers aren't there. So we became inclusive. And when you have allies or advocates that are part of the group, sometimes they are more vocal and more supportive than we are to ourselves. It's kind of the crab theory sometimes, and it's not specific to one group or another. But when somebody gets near the top of the pail, they want to pull them back down. And we have to remember that our like experiences are very, very important for each of us to know, to understand, to talk about race, to openly address the racial issues. I could never begin to understand what a African American woman's experience is, but I know what a social justice leader's experience is. And so we come through, we converse, we talk about all those things. And mentoring is really about a lifetime relationship. It's different than coaching. It's the development of a relationship, and as you develop and have these groups that support each other, and you can go to this group and say, I don't know what the hell I'm talking about, and people will help you. And so I just think this is a great opportunity to change the system. I think that is as critical an action item as I see right now, because the system has not worked for us to the extent that it should.
You know, Dr. Ken, two things that
Thank you,
you
Dr.
mentioned that I think
Magdaleno.
oh, I'm sorry, Dr. Alicia. Can I chime in for a
Oh, go
moment?
ahead. I was just gonna, yep, go ahead.
Oh, so I think two of the things that that Ken mentioned that I think bears a little bit more teasing out is the importance of, no matter where you sit, like really understanding and being able to apply what we know about um, um, ethnic studies and racial justice. And when we talk about and how that manifests itself within schools and within the system. And I think one of the opportunities that has been presented as a result of the stay-at-home orders with COVID is I have never seen so many teachers and just thirsty for learning about race and about how race has influenced the educational system, society at large. They really wanted to understand what this movement to the streets was about and how it influences young people when they come into school. And so there's just all of these webinars and whatnot that have been going on that have been just rich with content. What I am really encouraged by is, for the first time in my professional life, most of the conversation around racial justice, around anti-racism, around anti-Black racism, even around ethnic studies and the relationship between those thoughts and schools have been led by Black scholars, researchers, and practitioners. I mean, the voice of Black folk has been centered in understanding what we do in this moment in time. And I find that to be a brilliant opportunity to learn, listen, and understand, and then get what you need. My pastor at church says, you know, church is a place that you get what you need to go out there and do what you need to do in the world. And I feel like in this moment, we've been on more Zoom webinars, on more, you know, weekend conferences online. We've got access to people that we've never had access before, you know, for a lunch hour, so to speak, to get what we need to go back into schools, even if schools is on Zoom, and do the justice work that we were called to do. And the fact that it's centering Black voices, I think is something that has not happened.
Thank you so much for that. I'd like to move our conversation to some bright spots. So if you could think of some preparation programs that you've connected with, either in partnership with school districts or standalone programs that are really doing a fantastic job of not just recruiting Black teachers and leaders, but also supporting them as they move into and through their career. We'd love to hear some specific bright spots that you're aware of, that we can all be aware of and perhaps begin to model after.
May I start by saying that a lot of our Black teacher candidates somehow end up going through an alternative certification program. I think they pointed that out last week. And it was said, and it continues to be said in kind of a way that's like, well, you know, that's too bad that, you know, but we also have to realize some of the barriers that exist in teacher preparation programs that won't always allow that teacher candidate of color to be admitted into that type of program, and allow that an alternative certification program in some cases gives someone who's going to grow into a really great educator the opportunity to grow. So that's a long way of saying that I think there should be, you know, a nod to some of the alternative programs out there who have the ability to switch gears and really embrace this moment and embrace the opportunity to recruit and retain Black teacher candidates. I also have to point out,
Dr. Black, are there any you want to give a nod to?
I'm going to give a nod to Cal State Teach only because I know it so well. Only because I know it so well. And I do understand what they're doing. I should say what we're doing. So,
and that's quite excellent, Dr. Black. That's why you're here.
You know, just so it's clear that you know that I'm the system-wide director there. But you know, our goal this summer was to say, okay, we need to be strategic, not only about who we're admitting, how we're admitting, but what our curriculum looks like, what our teacher placements look like. So one of the things I did ask for this summer was to say, well, I don't want to place any more teacher candidates in any student teaching placement that does not support and really strive to include Black voices, Black children. And, you know, of course it's meant, you know, what are we going to do then? I don't know any placements like that. And that is the inherent problem. If we can't collectively think, well, this school district is doing a wonderful job, or this school in the school district is doing a wonderful job, then we're missing the boat with what we're doing as a teacher preparation program, and more so what we're doing in society with our school system. So we have to be, if the system as stated earlier, has to be ready to change, we understand that it's rarely ready. We've kind of gone through these motions to kind of assimilate into the system, but we have to make it change if we're going to succeed. So we can't wait for that change to happen. So we have to get in there and kind of drive that change and be about that change.
Thank you, Dr. Black. Dr. Francois?
Okay, so I'm going to try to phrase this at the risk of avoiding sounding self-promoting. I mean,
again, I'm going to say
I really
just fine. All three of you represent some alternative avenues for folks who need support, and so I absolutely expect to hear about each of your programs. So go right ahead.
So before I talk about the programs, I do want to address something that Dr. Black alluded to, and he didn't say outright, but I'm going to say it outright now. One of the things we need to stop doing is we need to stop this alternative, traditional, one's better than the other. We are all in the business of preparing equity-focused educators across the state. This time, it requires collaboration. It does not require competition. There are enough young people out there that we're trying to bring together to get into this field to do good work. And, you know, we're almost afraid and almost paralyzed when we start talking about educator prep, depending on what pathway you're to. And I'm here to tell you, we must have multiple pathways to teaching and leadership, or we will never get the numbers of young folks that we want to get out. So I just want to say, can we stop that? Not you, Dr. Black, but you know what I'm talking about, that whole narrative around alternative versus traditional. I'm just going to say, I don't actually care what you call yourself. Do good work, you know, do work for racial justice. We're good. I'm all good with that. And the fact that you have to actually convince people that it's a good thing to stand on these principles of, we will only work with schools and school districts and classrooms that have a commitment to Black people and to the voices of Black folks. I mean, that says something about society in general, that we have to convince people of that. That is not a radical idea. This is humanity. This is valuing all young people and the educators that they serve. So I'm gonna get off my soapbox. I'm gonna tell you a little bit about one of the programs that I think does a really good job of of recruiting and retaining Black leaders of color is the UCLA Principal Leadership Institute. And the director, Nancy Perricchini, has been the director for probably 2 decades now. And from the onset of the program, he has unapologetically said, this program is going to graduate and support throughout their careers Black and brown leaders in Los Angeles. And all the decisions that we make in this program are going to be about preparing them well, making sure that they're recruited into placements that they can be sustained and that they can thrive, and that UCLA PLI will create these opportunities for network support and development throughout their careers. And that's all she focuses on. And it's a very small program. Her faculty is probably the most diverse educator development faculty out there. And what they do now is they recruit teacher leaders from schools that serve large populations of Black students to come into the PLI program so that they can deepen their understanding of anti-racist, abolitionist leadership practices, so that when they go out into other schools, they take that with them, but they always have a place to come back to, right? So they have this network that has already been created. So an example of that is, I think, Alicia, you know that Baldwin Hills Pilot and Gifted Magnet is if it's not renowned, it should be renowned elementary school.
It's absolutely my happy place.
Yeah, in a predominantly Black neighborhood in Los Angeles. They are unapologetically Black-centric. Cultural relevancy and sustainability is at the core of their professional learning. And it starts with the leader, right? They have amazing teacher leaders historically who were doing individual work or work within their little cluster, their clique, so to speak. But the principal got there and she was like, we serve Black children. So we need our professional development, and our book study needs to be around how to help us do that better, you know? And she led that movement. And then she comes to UCLA PLI in order to get what she needs for her knapsack to do that work at Baldwin Hills Elementary School. The fruits of that have been PLI accepted a cohort of, I believe they were 5 veteran Black teachers from Baldwin Hills to be part of the Principal Leadership Institute. They went through as a cohort together, they studied together, they learned together. Baldwin Hills was like the focus of study. And I can tell you that there is a renewed energy on that staff. I can tell you that they are leaders now beyond Baldwin Hills. And another program that I also want to mention is that PLI engages is with what we call Partnership Leadership Fellows at PLI. And this is a partnership with the Partnership of Los Angeles Schools. And what we did with them, what PLI did with the partnership, is co-constructed a new pathway at UCLA with the Principal Leadership Institute that is specifically designed to support their professional development. So they already have a leadership pipeline within the partnership. And we took that and with their collaboration, deepened it and strengthened it. So leaders within the partnership can go through this unique experience together and not only be well positioned within the partnership and in line with what the partnership wants them to know and do and be able to understand, but also kind of the social justice, equity focused, grounded theory that UCLA has to offer. And so every other year, we have an agreement with the partnership that we will accept a certain number of candidates into the Principal Leadership Institute. Of course, they have to meet the requirements of the university. And the partnership helps us to identify who the most promising leaders are in that cohort, in the group of applicants to come into PLI. And it's those kinds of, when I said collaborations earlier, it's those kinds of collaboration focused on the teachers that we want to get in front of students, the leaders that we want leading, you know, our most struggling schools that unfortunately far too many of our Black students are enrolled in, that I think hold potential for transforming and keeping folks in the business, so to speak.
Great, thank you. So partnering Cal State Teach, UCLA PLI, Dr. Magdaleno, do you have any bright spot programs you want to tell us about?
Well, not since I left the university. Actually, that's not true. My center is, I believe, we're small but powerful. I believe that we are really making a difference, and we've moved from beyond the Central Valley, which you might understand and know that the Central Valley is a pretty red part of the state. It's fairly conservative up here, and it's you know, it's been a struggle to get voices of color to have an impact up here. However, we are now involved in collaboration with CPEP, which is a Cultural Proficiency Center, and the Randy and Dolores Lindsay. And we're doing some work with Fresno Unified and Visalia on cultural proficiency training. We also, as I indicated, my mentoring program is in its 9th cohort, and we are from the Bay Area now down to the other side of Los Angeles. And because we focus on social justice leadership, the conversations are rich and inclusive and really focused on addressing many of the issues that are not spoken of in the system. I'm a critical race theorist, so it really helps out to be able to address that issue. And we have a journal, by the way, and we've applied to have it. It'll be indexed hopefully by the turn of the year. And as I stated, I originally developed the journal in order to give young assistant professors of color a place to publish and publish about issues that they recognize as being of importance, and publish about us, our lives, what's important to us, what power means to us, what family means to us, what our culture. You know, I've told teachers so many times over the years, teachers and administrators, our kids don't need to be fixed, they need to be taught. Our kids come to the schools with value, with richness, and very often with more than 2 languages. And so we will continue the work. And I really believe, and you know, I've had this love-hate relationship with AXA over the years. I tell them what they need to do, and they do it very slowly. So but we still use our network, and and I get very frustrated because I've seen the small children who want to learn and aren't given the full opportunity, aren't treated with the respect and dignity, parents that aren't treated with respect and dignity. And, you know, our social justice philosophy really begins with dignity and respect. And so, Center for Leadership, Equity, and Research.
Awesome.
And thank you. Thank you for
so
allowing me to do that.
Oh, absolutely. We have one question. I think it was for you, Dr. Black, from the audience. And it was around, you mentioned a network, and the question was, are you suggesting that this comes within or outside the formal education system?
My suggestion, I mean, if we could do it really well, as one of my colleagues mentioned, it should really take into account our elders who have been through this. It should also include young people as well. So it shouldn't just be a group of veteran educators kind of telling you how to navigate, because we want to do more than navigate. We want change. You know, we don't want to continue to live through the same system over and over. So, you know, that crossroads of having, like Dr. Francois talked about, that principals group at UCLA. Now you have people who can mentor this group, but you also have people who are currently in that position. So you have people who can talk you through what could happen, but you have people who are actually able to talk you through what is happening. And ideally, you want to have that crossroads, that cross section of people in your group to move you forward.
Yeah, that's so important. So after we're done with this series, we're going to be putting together a statewide working group to deal with this issue. Can you just, each of you take 2 minutes to give the working group some advice? What advice would you give the working group that's going to be putting forth recommendations on how to solve the problem with the Black teacher and leader pipeline?
May I begin? Because I can hear my great granddaughter calling my name out here. She's been very patient.
Yes.
I love the fact that the term elder is treated with respect. I think that, you know, I having built so many mentoring programs, is that I remind folks that, you know, we get older, but we don't lose all our faculties. And many of us have paid the price. I mean, we cleared the road. When I mentor people, I say, you know, we cleared the road for you so you don't have to do all the same things. You don't have to fight the same battles. We did that, but don't go backwards, you know, but don't confuse someone's love of storytelling with not being focused. You know, we as people of color, we're storytellers. I'm a storyteller. My stories weren't in the textbooks. As I often said to publishers, where am I? And so the storytelling is such an important aspect of who we are, and mentoring and storytelling. And I'm doing another presentation for UCLA on Saturday on mentoring. And mentoring looks a lot of different ways. Some of the best mentoring that takes part is peer mentoring, you know, depending on who it is. And so, and developing that support system, when you can go into a room and just see each other as family, is absolutely amazing. You know, I always said that African American and Latino groups, we have to add a half hour onto the meetings because it takes us that long to settle down and be ready to talk about something besides family and, you know, all the rumors and everything that's taking place. But that's who we are. That's a wonderful part of who we are. Let's not lose that. Let's not lose that, because the standards, as the words that, you know, the standards has been mentioned a few times. Standards were not built for us, just like the system was not built for us. But let's make the system be there for us. Let's become the system. And finally, the one word that we use in CLEAR more than any is praxis. Paulo Freire's praxis, which to us means intentional activism, which means it's not just being an activist, it is doing it intentionally and openly so that we are role models for those that come after us. So
Thank you so much, Dr. Magdaleno, not only for your time, but also for your wisdom that you've shared today. Dr.
Thank
Francois?
you. I'm leaving. I'm sorry. I can hear her.
That's fine. Thank you so much, Dr. Magdaleno.
Okay.
Dr. Francois, what would you like to add? What advice would you give the working group?
I think for the working group, I would say go back to the transcripts because there are so many pearls of wisdom that were shared in the last hour. You cannot lose any of it. I'm emailing Dr. Black the moment I get off this webinar. I think what I would leave the working group with is to ask the question, whose voices that are critical to this conversation is not part of this conversation? And we've been talking about leaders, we've been talking about teachers, and those are voices that are critical to the conversation. And I think too few of us are at the table when important conversations are had and important decisions are being made. But I also don't want to forget the voices of parents, community members, and the students themselves. And that you could get those voices if you just pay attention to and go out into the streets, right? And go to the pulses, the social centers of Black life. And you could spend weeks there and folks will tell you what is wrong with the educational system and what they want for their kids out of teachers and leaders. I started my teaching career when the principal of the school, the teachers at the school, the paraprofessionals at the school, the plant manager at the school, all of the, and everybody lived in the neighborhood. So this community school model mattered. Those are the people I want to hear from to find out how we can do this better. Because we have been listening, I think we might have been listening to too narrow of a group. And that's why this is a pervasive challenge. And the other thing that I would say to the working group is we have no other choice in this moment than to recognize that teaching and leading are not only acts of service, political acts that require activism. And that we must be engaged in activism. And how do we nurture our aspiring teachers and leaders to take on that new role in really meaningful ways?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Dr. Black.
I'm a storyteller at heart, and I've been trying really hard not to tell any stories today, and I'm not going to start now. We only have 5 minutes. But what I would tell the group, I've been on some of these statewide work groups for various organizations, including CTC. And, sometimes it's just me there who looks like me. And it's very difficult to get your point across when no one is listening to what you have to say. So you brought me here for a reason, but you don't want me to speak. So I would say for sure, everyone at the table gets to speak, whoever is at that table. And as Dr. Francois said, who's at the table? Who gets to come to this table? Who gets to say something? We understand that the standards and the system are not built for us. We've been navigating that, some successfully, somewhat poorly, over the years for 50 years or more, right? But if we are in this moment and we're looking at education and education preparation from our own worldview and not considering any other view, then we're doing it wrong.
And I just say one thing. Dr. Alicia, I have got to respond to what Dr. Black just said, because he is exactly right. And there's two sides to that, right? It's, you brought me to the table, but you won't let me speak. And the other side of that is, you brought me to this table, and now I'm going to speak, whether you want to hear it or not. And I think we have to be reminded, because the system will make us believe that because you brought me to the table, I owe you something.
Hmm.
I do, but I owe the young people in schools, I owe teachers and leaders in those schools more than I could ever owe whoever brought me to the table. And that's not disrespectful to any of the organizations who have invited me to participate in their spaces. I live in gratitude for that. And I hope that they would know that you brought me to this table because of what I believe in and what I can contribute. And I think sometimes when we see that we are the only ones at that table, it silences us. And I just want to remind all of us who are in leadership positions or growing into leadership positions that find ourselves in spaces where our voices matter, that sometimes we just have to power pose, take a deep breath, and dive right in and know that we were put there for a purpose, and let that give us the strength to participate in that space, because we're not going to get those opportunities often.
Right.
Well, until we diversify this workforce, which we're going to make happen too.
That is an amazing note to end our webinar on. And I just want to thank you both for your time. And, you know, we had a conversation, the three of us who put this together, about, you know, being unapologetically Black centered about this conversation. We actually went back and forth of whether we were going to focus on teachers of color or Black teachers, and we solidly landed on Black teachers. The numbers speak for themselves. And I hope that everyone online will join us next week as we finish this series with conversations with practitioners around the pipeline for Black teachers and leaders. It will not be at 11:30, it will be at 12 noon. And that time change will be evident in your links as you get that. And please look for a follow-up email from us that will ask you if you want to be a part of our working group. We are asking you to lend your voice. The more facets on a diamond, the more brilliant, and every piece of work has the potential of being a diamond. And we appreciate everyone who joined us today. Thank you so much for your time again, and we'll see you next week. Thank you.
Thank you.